We talked about poker a moment ago. The best analogy I can have is if we could play poker and your cards are face up, I should win every time.
Yep.
Right. And so sales is the ability to have a conversation with the other person where they're opening up completely and you know how to navigate this conversation, right? Once I can see your cards, I know how to navigate this conversation.
Welcome to another episode of the Wholesale Elite Podcast. I am Isham Hipshire, and I'm joined by my dude, Mr. Tanner Santucci. What up, bro?
What's up, my guy?
Guys, the legend is in the building, Mr. Steve Trang. What's up, sir?
Not a whole lot. Just staying after it. Keep fighting that good fight.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Absolutely. This is incredible. I'm a ginormous fan of yours, and I don't know if it's awkward to say I'm a fan, but I really am. You've led the charge. You paved the way for people like Tanner and I to be able to even do what we do and have the lifestyle that we have. So I am honored to have you on today, and I cannot wait to dive into your story. Obviously I've seen you a lot, and we've seen and heard from you a lot. But we really want to dig into this story. I'm sure there's some episodes out there where you do share your story, but we want to do it the Wholesale Elite way. So welcome to the show,
Absolutely.
Sir.
Well, it was an honor for me to be here, and it was great meeting both of you guys last Sunday, just a matter of fact, just a few days ago. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, that was cool. And that was unexpected. We had no clue that you were on the agenda. He rolled it out a couple days prior to, and we saw Steve Trang, and then we saw, I think it said like sales disruptors or something. I thought it was going to be like a representative. Some people will come out and like pitch for the guy, but the guy showed up and we're like, holy crap, Steve's here. So
and anything Jamil asks of me, I'm in, right? That guy, he mentored me, right? So anything he asks of me, I'm in.
That's awesome. Well, we're in. We're ready to go and ready to dive in. And as usual, we like to start with origin stories. And so I'd love to go back because your story is fascinating. We all share a really common passion for capitalism, but our reasons for that are different. And your reason seems to be way more impactful and long-standing. Yeah. So I'd love to go back to the origin story and kind of hear, how you became who you are right now.
Yeah. So, and I appreciate you asking that. So I had my grandparents, so we're all from China. If you want to get really particular, we're from the Fujian province, which is like the southeast corner. Like if you were to look at maybe like Florida, like it's the southeast tip of China. And, many decades ago, communism became popular. And so communism kind of, persisted and continued across the country. And at some point, right, affected my family, and they lost everything. And they were merchants, right? They weren't the farmers. They were the merchants, but they lost everything. Communism took everything away. And what they decided to do was flee. So they fled to Vietnam. And people from China fled all over Southeast Asia. The dialect, the area I'm from, Fujian, is a dialect of Chinese I speak. And that dialect is actually pretty prevalent around most of Southeast Asia. Unfortunately, it's entirely useless inside the United States. So I regret that that's the dialect that I learned. But anyway, so my grandparents all fled to Vietnam. And they started anew, right? Had my parents restarted their businesses. Grandfather on my mom's side was selling scrap metal. Grandfather on my dad's side was a jeweler. And so they restarted everything. And then communism again came and took everything away. And so my parents decided to flee. And in fleeing, you had to bribe, right? You had to buy your way out of Vietnam. So they gave jewelry. Wow. To flee Vietnam. As a matter of fact, at one point, my dad tried to flee without paying anyone off, and he got stuck into a prison, for trying to flee. So my parents fled, and they go on these, terrible boats, rickety boats, and everyone was fleeing around the same time, and pirates would go out into the oceans and murder and rape, right? These are real pirates, and so this is a real thing of being murdered and raped. So fortunately, none of those things happened to my parents. They came out. There are people that came armed on those boats to, as part of fleeing together. And so they made it all the way to Malaysia. And when they made it all the way to Malaysia, they were basically saying like, hey, you come onto our land, we will shoot you because we're done with the refugees. And we were done.
The Malaysian government or
the Malaysian
people.
soldiers were instructed to shoot if you try to come onto land, right? And so the people that were on my parents' boats sabotaged the boat so that we couldn't go back into the ocean. And so they had to take us in, but they took us in only temporarily before they sent us back out. And when I say us, I'm talking about just my parents.
Right.
But this is a humanitarian crisis, right? And all the world is paying attention, right? Because we've all seen footage of the helicopter leaving, right? This is a humanitarian crisis. And so a lot of countries in Europe sent their ships, and we were picked up by an Italian Navy ship. And so being picked up in a Navy ship, they took us they dropped us off in a refugee camp in Italy. And that's where I was born. Right. So I was born in a refugee camp in Italy. And we came to the United States through sponsorships from Christian families. So there was a church, I think it's up in Flagstaff. They sponsored all of us to come out. They're raising money as a church to sponsor families to come out to the United States again to deal with this crisis. And we came here. There's still we have a picture of when we landed in Sky Harbor Airport. That's the airport in Phoenix. And I'm just this little baby, right? So everything I know is America. But the reason why I'm so pro-capitalism is because we've experienced communism twice, and it was not a happy ending either way. It was not the Hollywood ending that they promised.
Jeez. What? Okay. So question. So you were born a refugee. Was your mother pregnant throughout this whole travel excursion, or did that happen at the refugee camp?
I've never asked that question. I probably should. I've never asked that question.
I see.
Because I can't even imagine how they would do it on the boats. So I don't know. I never asked that question.
I see. Okay. Like, man, a lot of downtime in the refugee camp.
Probably.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So capitalism. Now, I just want to dig in a little bit on capitalism because I don't know if I know anyone that comes from a family with a story as yours at all, but I don't know if a lot of people, would get the message from that as, middle finger to communism. Let's go with capitalism. Mm-hmm. How come you focused on the capitalistic aspect of this versus just, good versus evil and, things like that?
Well, I mean, I guess we can't really focus on the good versus evil because I can't really do anything about that. Right.
Right.
But what I can do is I can make a lot of freaking money, right? And if I make a lot of money, then other people will also appreciate the virtues of capitalism. So I think, the capitalism really spoke to me, but also I'm really hardwired to do things my own way. So,
I see.
I'm very, very libertarian. Like, I don't care what you do, just leave me alone.
Same.
Right.
Yep.
And so I think that capitalism and that libertarian streak is very, it goes hand in hand. So I can't control what people do. I can't control how they vote. I can't control their decisions. But what I can do is I can influence by, you see a lot of these guys that write these books, right? If you're successful, you can help other people become successful. And it's through that success that you can get that message out. So I think that's the reason why I'm so pro-capitalist. I think the other thing too is I'm a college grad. I graduated Arizona State 2002, and I went to UC San Diego. I graduated with a master's degree in 2003. And even back then, I can see this steady trickle of indoctrination. And I was like, you guys are a bunch of idiots. I don't know what you guys are talking about. But again, this is not lined up with how I've experienced this world. It's not this doesn't line up with how I perceive the world.
Right.
And so it just didn't make a lot of sense to me. So I think the harder they pushed me left in college, it probably pushed me a little bit further right.
Gotcha. Understandable. Since you are, a capitalist and had that mindset, were you the kid in school that was, selling candy and gum, and were you that hustler?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I was selling candy. Like in 8th grade, I was buying candy from Espinosa's. I'd buy them for a nickel each, sell them for a quarter. It didn't last very long because I got in trouble because you're not supposed to sell candy on school property. I would do well on tests and stuff, and they give us candy, as a reward for doing well. I sell the candy. I remember in high school, sophomore year, we were in, I think it was like algebra 3-4. I was in the morning math class, and then there'd be a later math class, but like same subject material. But like I always did well in math. And so I would finish the test quickly, put all the answers in my calculator and save it as a TI 85. Nice. And I would auction it off to whoever was willing to pay the most.
That's awesome.
That's a new one.
Yeah,
well, I haven't heard of that one.
That's good.
But like in like 7th grade, I think, I was getting Nintendo Power, and I would like take all the cheat codes from Nintendo Power. I think one of them was like all the fatalities,
right.
Mortal Kombat.
Mortal Kombat, yeah.
Right. So, I put them all into a word processor on whatever computer my dad had, print them all, and I sold them at school, all the fatalities, I think for $7, right?
Holy shit.
In middle school.
That's incredible. I'm always envious of you people that were hustlers when you were young. Like I had zero entrepreneurial, bones in me. I was probably the dummy that was buying the candy. And
well, it probably helped a lot that my parents were poor, right? It helped that they were poor, but they were also very open. Like we talked about money. Money was not a taboo topic in our family. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite of taboo. My grandmother, who took over the jewelry business when my grandfather passed, she was, for better or for worse, the queen of gossip. So she knew exactly how much everyone in the family made. And so everyone knew how much everyone in the family made.
Wow.
Right? Like,
no secrets. So like it was the anti-taboo topic. Everyone just talked about money.
Are you still that way where you're pretty open with your finances and whatnot?
Well, this might be the reason why I'm so open when I talk on podcasts and this and that, but no, like that is definitely changed. With my grandmother passing.
That? Okay.
I think because we all became Americanized. Right? I think we got this blend like immigrant in the new country. I think you have to assimilate. You have to become accustomed, to the culture. I mean, as a matter of fact, when I came to this country, right, Steve was not my name, obviously, right? But when I became naturalized as a citizen at 5 years old, my parents were saying, "Hey, you're starting kindergarten next year. We should have an American name." And so they went to my cousin, and she asked her, what were your favorite American names? She's like, "Well, I like 2 names, Steve and Desmond." So they came to me, "Steve, which one you want?" I was like, "I'll take Steve."
You got to pick your own name?
I got to pick my own name before
That's
kindergarten.
Pretty cool. My mom tells me it was either going to be Isham or Gary. I was like, those are 2 shitty options.
Those cannot be any more different.
Yeah. I was like, what? So yeah, I didn't get the choice. I probably would have went Gary knowing what I know now, but no, Isham's a fun conversation piece. Man. Okay. So you went to college, and then you said you got your master's like a year later.
Yeah.
Were you just incredibly smart? Because I mean, that's tough to get your grad, and done in a year.
Yeah. I mean, I don't brag about it, but I like to think to think I'm pretty smart. Yeah. So
I was hoping you were going to say you used your TI calculator or something.
I mean, we had to use calculators, that's for sure. So the way I described it, I went to Arizona State University and I went to UC San Diego. The reason why, and I'm not a great basketball player, but the reason why I am as skilled or as quality as I am at basketball is because the basketball games were super intense at Arizona State, right? Like they were gifted in sports. Academics, though, wasn't really hard. So I got a full ride to UC San Diego, right? Academically, wasn't that challenging. Physically, very challenging, right? So then I go to UC San Diego and I'm playing basketball there. And like they're terrible. Right? But academically, man, that was hard. So I went from someone that is like top tier, right, compared to my fellow Americans. And then when I went to UC San Diego, that's when I got to see like what real smart people are, right? Because like in order to make it into the US, you got to be top tier in your country, right? So I'm going against like the smartest people from India, Korea, Taiwan, Switzerland, Nigeria, China, right? So like I had to go against the best of the best. I had to really, I had to dig deep.
That's incredible. Okay, so you're in college now. Well, actually, you graduated college. We'll start off there. And how? Because I believe you have an engineering background, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. How did that transfer to real estate?
It didn't transfer at all.
Yeah.
So I would say the biggest thing that engineering helps is critical thinking.
Sure.
Critical thinking, hypothesizing, seeing what works, what doesn't work, and adjusting quickly. And we operate only on data. Feelings are irrelevant, right? What does the data tell us? And so where it helps is that I can think critically. I've got organized thinking, and it's either it is or it isn't, and there's no room for feelings. So I think that's what's helped. It doesn't help on the sales side, but it helps as a business owner.
I see. Okay. So, you went into engineering, I'm assuming you did that.
Yeah.
For a
I
worked
for Intel, for 3.5 years.
Oh, no kidding. What'd you do after Intel?
Realtor.
How did that happen?
Well, we all read a lot of us have read Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? That was like the one that like it flips a switch.
Right.
Yeah, so we start buying rental properties with a W-2 income, and along the way, I meet this real estate broker, and I was like, "What do you do exactly? And how much money do you make?" He's like, "Well, I make 100,000 plus, and I just talk to people all day." And at this moment, I'm thinking, "Well, I'm a lot smarter than all these other people that are real estate agents. I should be able to just step in and crush." I didn't, but that was what my confidence was directing me. And so I came in, I didn't crush, didn't help that I started in 2007, right? I started middle of 2007. But what also didn't help was that people don't buy based off of what you know, they base off of how they feel. And so I could explain anything and everything about a real estate transaction, right? But I can never get you the feelings that you wanted to feel so that you would buy. So that was my greatest weakness. So it took a lot to learn how to talk to a person such that they'll feel the feelings they need to feel versus knowing what they need to know.
Right.
So when you started in real estate, being an engineer, did you have the people skills that it took? Like, did you feel comfortable, talking to people you didn't know? Because engineers have that stigma of, you're an engineer.
Sure. So I completely know what you mean. So I was an engineer and I did well there, but I wasn't wired like an ordinary engineer. So what I found when I was in engineering, like I would be up in Sacramento, right? When I first worked at Intel, we were up in Folsom, just outside of Sacramento. I was like, guys, let's go out. Let's go get drinks. Let's go talk to girls, right? And they're like, no, I'm playing World of Warcraft. I was like, but we can't, do those other things that we're playing World of Warcraft. Right. And so what ended up happening was to go out, I would be hanging out with not my coworkers. I would actually be hanging out with other people that I met through basketball, right? So that I can go out. So I didn't fit in really as an engineer because I'm not as introverted, right? But then when I got into sales, I also found out I'm not as extroverted, right? So I'm somewhere, I used to think I was on the 40-yard line, every time I'm introvert, extrovert, 40-yard line on a football field. But Jamil's like, nah, you're like 20. It's like, okay, well, but I'm still not, I'm not really, really quiet. So being willing to talk to people was never a problem. The thing that my friends always laughed at was whenever we went out, I would always go straight to the hottest girl at the club, right? Like there was never like, should I do it? Should I not do it? There wasn't like, maybe I'll talk to this girl. Like it was just straight beeline. It's the most attractive.
Dang. What do you attribute your confidence to?
I think it's just knowing that it doesn't hurt to get a rejection. Right? It's just, again, all feelings aside, it doesn't hurt to get a rejection. Like your ego gets busted a little bit, but who cares? Right?
Sure.
Like you can recover that. Just a little more alcohol, that fixes that problem.
Right. Okay, so you're an agent now, and you're realizing, man, I need to get better at sales. I need to get better at influencing someone's mind, their beliefs. I believe that's what you said. People buy on emotion, not on logic. And so,
well, I didn't know this yet. So at this time, I didn't know this yet. All I know is I was getting stumped on, and I need to think about it. So what I did is like, okay, we have a problem here. Steve's not good at sales. Steve's good at marketing, getting leads, getting people raising their hands. Good at systems, but not good at sales. So I was like, all right, I'm going to continue focusing on the leads. I'm continue focusing on operations, and I'm just going to hire a bunch of pushy salespeople. That's what I did, because I believe that's what it took.
Right. So what do you credit because now you have a sales course. So what do you credit your sales ability? Like how'd you learn to become a good salesperson?
So Pace Morby, right, is another friend. And so there was a time where when I had the brokerage, he was my contractor. So he was my contractor and I own a brokerage. I'm wholesaling. He's wholesaling. He's not telling me that he's wholesaling. I'm not telling him that I'm wholesaling, right? It's just I'm a broker. He's a contractor. And then I get wind that he's a homebester guy. I was like, Pace, you're a homebester guy. Like, send me your deals. Like, I can't. It's like, why not? It's like, I got to send him 2 people. Jamil's one. I was like, okay, but like, let me be the 3rd guy. Right. And I keep, bothering him and harassing him. Right. And one day he's like, Steve, you're trying to buy deals from homebester guys? Like, yeah. Like, I don't know how to make this any more clear. And he says, well, there's a place where all the homebester guys hang out every Friday. And I was like, wait a minute. There's a place where all the homebester guys are every Friday? It's like, yeah. It's like, where's that? It's like, I was in Sandler. It's like, I'm there. Right. And so I called up the guy and I was like, I want to join. He's like, why? It's like, because there's a bunch of homebester guys in there. And I know if I'm in that room, I'm going to buy a lot of houses. Right. Like, I'm going to hunt where the fish are.
Sure.
Yep.
And for me, I was willing to pay $20K on the spot to join the room because there's no way I don't make $20K right in the room. As a matter of fact, I made $20K in that room. I want to say like a month and a half into it.
Nice.
Right. It's like in my mind, like I don't care what it costs. I'm going to be in there, and it costs like $7,000, so it was a steal in my opinion. But I go in there. I don't know what Sandler is. I don't even care what Sandler is. I just want to hang out with all the homebester guys. As I'm there, I was like, this trainer guy, he's pretty good. This guy is unlocked sales for me, because like I've read the books, right? We've read Never Split the Difference. We've read, I can't list all the books right now, but like I've read all the sales books, spin selling, whatever. I read all the sales books up until that point, and I've applied them and they've worked. But man, like that one sales trainer, he just kind of put it all together where then things just clicked. And that was when I learned how to sell effectively. It was just because I'm in a room full of other homebester guys learning how to buy houses deep. And so this guy's teaching Sandler's selling system, which is a wonderful system, which is a large chunk, a significant chunk of our sales comes from that, right? But what we did is we took other things we've learned, we go in the living room, we apply it, we figure out what works, what doesn't work. And that's the evolution. So like right now, our latest iteration of what we sell in our sales training today is from what I learned from Sandler, all these other books, applying, going to the living room, and then having the good fortune to train the best in the country, right? Because I'm the trainer inside Collective Genius. I get to train the best in the country, and I get to just update our curriculum so that it is the most updated, most current version and most effective.
Awesome. So, okay. So with the Sandler sales trade, like you said, you'd read all the books at this point, and now you're talking to this guy and he just unlocks it. What was it that he delivered that was so different, that was so impactful?
So the books are great because the books tell you the theory. They tell you what to say.
Right.
And what to say is really important. But what's more important than what to say is how to say it. And so you read the books, you can get the what, you can get the words, right? You can have all the words. You can have the best scripts on the planet. And I believe in scripts, right? It's not bagging on scripts. You can have all that. But if you can't say it the right way, it doesn't matter, right? Like, I got a chance to listen to Chris Voss speak at a private event. And one of the things he said was good tonality can make up for poor choice of words. But good words cannot make up for lack of tonality.
Gosh, that's so good.
That is so good.
One of the guys on our team, I'm sure, Tanner's the same way. We've got one guy on our team who he's just a monster. Like he's fearless. He's that guy that can just keep getting punched in the face, and he's 19 and he just keeps going. And we're like, man, I mean, we bought and read as a team. You can't teach a kid to ride a bike at a seminar.
Yeah.
Which is, forgive me for turning around and on my mic,
You're good.
but so we bought that book and we just dug through it. And I think we're experiencing exactly what you're talking about, because we learned some good things, but then we would, or he, I should say, would try to put them into practice, kept hitting the wall. And and so thankfully we met you this past weekend, and I'm sure we'll go more into sales training, in your sales training in a little bit. But so good. I'm fascinated to know that we're in the right spot. With that being said, you seem to, like, looking back through your life, based on what you've told me, there's like a theme of like consistency. You do stuff, it seems like, for a decent amount of time, going to school, getting your undergrad, and, so you're self-aware and you're consistent. Have you always been consistent, or is that a muscle that you had to build?
Well, I'm glad you guys say that. I don't feel like I'm consistent, and my best friends think I'm grossly inconsistent. But from the outside, it looks like I'm a consistent person that's a hard worker, right? That's what it always looks like, and I get that feedback all the time. My default state is not consistent or hardworking. It's just, that's what it takes. It's just what it takes, So, like, I'm a very process oriented person. So, like, when I was going through sales training, I was going there 2 hours every Tuesday, 90 minutes on Wednesdays, 90 minutes on Fridays, right? I'm all in on this. Kung Fu, right? I am absolutely adamant, but we got to do this the right way. And I don't have to be. Right, because if I wasn't, my Sifu would let me know, and then he'll just like slap me around. So like,
right.
But I am committed to process. Basketball, I actually got like the best backhanded compliment the other day, right? Because I made that little highlight reel.
Right.
He's like, "Hey, Steve," right? He's like, "I can tell, like, you got a really good jump shot and pump fake, and you probably needed to make up for your lack of athleticism." It's like, thank you.
Ouch. Thank you.
Right. But what was it though? Like, I am committed to mastering fundamentals and processes, because we know if we can master processes and fundamentals, everything else takes care of itself. Same thing with poker, right? Like, I tried to be a professional poker player. I did my best to master the processes and fundamentals. And then I got creative. And then I started adding my own flavor to it, adding my own personality to it. And that's the same thing with sales, right? It's just everything I do, I am committed to mastering the fundamentals to the best of my ability before we add our own flavor to it, which is hard because most of us want to add our flavor to it from the get-go.
Yeah, that's me. And, hearing you, like, you gave us a demonstration when we were at the event this past week, and we asked you a question about, hey, how do we handle this one thing? And, we stepped into the hall, and you explained, kind of in a role-playing scenario, what that sounds like. And it's funny because I've heard you say that like 16 other times, and it was like, why didn't that stick? And so I'm assuming it's just, consistent. It's saying the same thing over and over and over again. Now, how do you get good at saying the same thing over and over and over again without sounding like you're used to saying it over and over and over again?
I'm just looking at, so I want to win, right? And I know if this is what it takes to win, then this is what I'll do. Right. So it's really what it comes down to. Kind of goes back to, like, I'm an introvert, right? We talked about by nature, I'm an introvert, but I'm willing to put myself out there. And I was actually talking to a consultant about that. I was like, explain this to me, right? It says very clearly that I'm an introvert, and yet you see me doing all these things. And he's like, why is that? He's like, oh, it's easy. I was like, what is it? It's like, your desire to win will outweigh every other factor, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, it's like poker. Like, I know this is the optimal way to play the hand. I will play that hand that way every single time. There will be zero deviation. If this is the optimal way to do it, I'll do that way every single time. I don't have any desire to modify it because, again, winning is the ultimate objective. It's the ultimate outcome. And by the way, when I say winning, feelings are irrelevant, right? I don't care how the feeling, I don't care if it's uncomfortable. These things are irrelevant. I only care if I do this. It doesn't matter how uncomfortable it is. If it gets me the outcome I want, nothing else matters.
That's so impressive. Your desire to win is massive. Obviously, were your parents competitive people? Like, did they show you this way, or where did this desire come from?
I think probably a good chunk of it is hardwiring. Is how we're born. But then also, my best friend is ultra competitive. And so, we played a lot of sports and played a lot of video games. And I think that's just what it is. And it's funny, you're looking back, this is not a good thing about me, right? Like, looking back when we were playing video games, it wasn't about winning. It was about him losing and how angry he would be and how funny that was to me. Right. And like me kind of like,
I love it.
It was about me like celebrating the wins and like, whatever I could say to just make him angrier. That's what it was about. It wasn't about winning. It was about him losing. And, there's a book, it was Tim Grover, Relentless, right? He talks about the dark side of cleaners, right? Like the guys that like, the Kobe Bryant's, Michael Jordan, this and that, like they got a dark side to them. And it's those that can embrace it. And so like for me, I talk about winning and we talk about collaboration and this and that. But I'd be lying to you if I said that it doesn't feel good to watch the other guy kind of like walk away with his head down, head down, shoulders down.
Do you think that being ultra competitive is almost a prerequisite for success in the world of real estate?
I don't think it's prerequisite, but it certainly helps.
Yeah.
You were talking about that 19-year-old that can get punched in the face all day. So that competitive nature is very closely correlated with independent and competitive nature. And so that competitive nature is what allows you to get beat up over and over again, right? Because you want to figure this out.
Right.
You want to solve this problem. And your willingness to go through the fire, even though you face rejection and failure over and over again. There's this very, very strong correlation between willingness to go into the fire over and over again and competitiveness, right? Because if you didn't have this strong desire to conquer it, why would you keep going through it?
It's true. Okay. What's one of the last things you did that was out of your comfort zone?
I would say lives, right? Going live on camera. So let's see, it was 2018, right? When I started doing Facebook Lives. And I actually had a coach, mentor, Darren Hardy back in 2016.
Nice.
I paid a lot of money to go to this event, and I'm at this event and he has this book of marketing. It's like this thick, right? It's like how to run an effective business, 2.5-day workshop. This is the binders this thick. And one of them was you had to be the face of the company, or the company has to have a face. And unfortunately, the way things were working, I couldn't have someone be the face. It just didn't make sense.
Right.
Because I didn't have anyone that could be a spokesperson that wasn't an independent contractor. Everyone that I had working with me was an independent contractor. So it would be risky to make them the face of the company, right? At least not without giving them equity.
Right.
So I embraced it. I was like, all right, I'm going to be the face. I don't want to be. So I would say the last thing is putting myself out there. And it's not because of the rejection, because I get rejected all day. Again, it's no big deal. I have people calling me fat, whatever. It doesn't bother me the least bit. It's just I would rather watch other people I'm supporting win. So it's not that Steve has to win in the game of business, but I want other people to win. And unfortunately, in this day and age, the only way for people around me to win is that I have to be the face of the company.
I wasn't expecting that answer, to be honest with you, because after you explaining how confident you are, I feel like that would have been something that you would have wanted to do.
Right.
So
But remember also, I'm an introvert by nature, right? So, I worked for my mentor for I think 5 years before I went off on my own. And one thing I learned about myself is that although I'm ultra competitive, my team has to win. I want my team to win, right? I don't have to win. My team has to win. And so I've always been the guy that I will be whoever you need me to be, right? So like using sports, I'm not a rebounder, right? But if there's a good rebounder on the other side, I'll make sure he doesn't get rebounds. I will box him out.
Nice.
Right? He won't get rebounds. I'm not going to get the rebound, but he won't get rebounds.
Right. Smart.
Defense, right? I'll never shut anybody down. Someone's a good scorer, they're a good scorer, right? But what I can do is make him tired, right? He's going to have to earn every single point, whether through free throws or moving more than he wanted to move. But I'm not athletic, but I will make you work, right? I might be, hand checking quite a bit. Right? It is what it is. But like, I will be whoever the team needs me to be for us to win. So I don't need the MVP, right? I just need us to win. So I was totally fine being number 2 at a company and helping a company win. Just unfortunately, that previous mentor didn't want to put in the work for him to be number 1 for us to win.
I see. You so kind of going back to when you're in sales and you really wanted to get better at it because you realized that was kind of the one thing that you were missing. I've learned just throughout reading a bunch of books and stuff that don't focus on your weaknesses, focus on your strengths, right? Your weaknesses, your weaknesses, leave those alone, focus on your strengths. But it seems like you went all in on your weaknesses and now you've got a company built out around that. Is that a myth? Is that whole saying just kind of bullshit, or what are your thoughts on focusing on?
I don't think so. So even though sales was my biggest weakness, the reason why it was my biggest weakness is because it wasn't taught properly, right? If I have to sell you like timeshares or like a nice car or watches, it would still be my weakness because there I need to be able to transfer emotion. I need to be able to transfer excitement, right? Selling coaching, right? I need to sell you on this dream, right? In those instances, that would be my weakness because I can't transfer emotions just because I have limited emotions.
Right.
Right. But buying houses, this is just being super empathetic. It's being understanding and introspective, understanding the other person and feeling connection and trust. And if that's the case, I don't have a weakness here because I can understand your world. I can understand your pain. I can see where you're coming from. Right. So, so it was a weakness only because it was never taught properly for me, or the way it was taught was not delivered effectively enough for me. So I still believe you should never focus on your weaknesses specifically, because if you focus on your weaknesses, it's not just the least effective use of your time, but also you're going to experience more burnout. Right. So for me, I think I turned my weakness into a strength, but it was only because I didn't learn it the right way.
Do you think that you can teach, not you specifically, but just someone can be taught to be more empathetic? Is that a thing that you can increase in yourself if you lack empathy?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's gonna be hard for certain people, but you just gotta plug into their why, right? Again, you look at the DISC, right? You got DISC, the desire to win, the drive, right? You've got the drive, you'll figure out how to be empathetic, right? The I, which is the social approval. Well, if you want to be liked, this is what it takes to be liked. You're going to get better at it. The drive to the driving, the S, right? The inconsistency with the process. You might have a problem with it, but you got to look at, again, the other things, the outcome, the desired outcome.
Right.
And then analytical people, I think, can be empathetic so long as they got emotional intelligence. That's the challenge there. But yeah, I think you can figure out how this helps them, and then once you figure out how this helps them, they can more consistently follow that process, follow that tactic and technique.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. That gives hope, because there's times, Tanner and I were talking, and we're like, man, we really, we're in the relationship business, in real estate, and more specifically to our niche, we do land only. And it's an interesting dynamic, because in land, it's purely transactional. There's zero emotion, attached to that person's land. But in order to win that transaction, you've got to win them over emotionally. Like, you've got to develop a relationship with our sellers. Yeah. And so we rely really heavily on someone's EQ when they're joining our team. So we're almost just looking for that one thing. can you connect with someone emotionally? Do you think that's kind of the wrong way to approach hiring in terms for real estate acquisition guys and things like that? Or
I don't think it's wrong. I would just say that there's probably more you want to have to it. So I think emotional intelligence is super important. I think also they have to have a why. You know, if you don't have a why to be successful, you're not going to do what you need to do, right? Because like sales is not a job that you just kind of like, oh, you know, I'll just do this. Like you're getting abused all day, every day. So you need to have a purpose,
right, in
order to be the willingness to do that. I think on top of emotional intelligence, something you have to learn as well, emotional intelligence and drive. You're going to have to learn, you know, some wittiness, some bantering. One of the shows we do is Pardon the Disruption. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of fun.
Love it.
And yeah. And those guys are really witty and that helps in the living room.
Sure.
Right? Like, RJ Bates, right? Like he and I think he gets picked on the most in the show. I think sometimes
absolutely does. Yeah. It's between him and CJ.
Yeah. Right. But if you look at it, he doesn't have a traditional sales process and it doesn't matter because he has a comeback for everything the seller says.
Yep.
Which is great. It's just not a repeatable skill, or it's not a skill that can be easily trained, right?
Sure, yeah.
And so for him, he's got that wittiness. So that's something to be good to have, right? So like for me, I enjoy the ability to talk trash if you're working on my sales team.
Right. What's your advice for someone who maybe should or needs to increase their wit? Because yes, maybe they're sitting in a bunch of living rooms. They need to be able to think quickly on their feet. Mm-hmm. What's your advice for those people that struggle with that?
I think the easiest answer is joining Toastmasters. I've never been a member, but I've attended one event. They do a lot of impromptu speaking. We're like, hey, Isham, all right, it's your turn to talk. Give me a 5-minute presentation on jackets.
Oh wow.
Right, and just on the spot, you gotta make a 5-minute presentation about jackets. Right,
and it's called Toastmasters.
Toastmasters, yeah.
Toastmasters.
Right. So I think that's one spot. Another thing is we used to play this game in our office where like we got these little poker chips, and anytime someone asks you a question and you answered it, you had to give up the poker chip. Right. You're not allowed to answer the first question. You had to find out what the question is behind the question. You know, you must be asking that for a reason. Oh, how come you're asking me that question right now? What were you hoping to hear? Right. Like, but if you answered the question, you lost the chip. So in our office, we're playing the game where if you answered a question with an answer, you lost your chip.
Interesting. So you have to answer it with another question.
Mm-hmm.
What's the purpose of that?
Question. Because people are unable to ask the question they want to ask. The common example I think in our business is how long you've been in business. And he's like, oh yeah, I've been in business for 3 years. Well, that does absolutely nothing to address the seller's concerns.
Sure.
Right. So like, how long have you been in the business? Well, that's an interesting question. You must be asking for a reason. Well, I just want to make sure that whoever is buying my house actually can buy my house. Hey, that makes total sense. What would you need to see or hear to feel comfortable knowing that we're the right people to buy your house? Well, if you can show me a bank statement, a list of houses you bought, some testimonials, whatever. Okay, so if I can show you some testimonials, at that point you would feel comfortable that we are able to buy your house. Yes, great. You give them the testimonials, right? But how long you been in the business and show me all the testimonials are very different questions, or the answer they want is very different than the question that they asked.
Sure. Sure. So, okay. Well, let's transition into the sales training talk now. I mean, I guess we've been on it for a little bit, but
yeah.
Why you? There's tons of sales training out there. You've got a real estate business, you've got all this other stuff. Why start a sales training business?
So why did I start a sales training business, or why should someone work with us?
No. Why did you start?
So I saw a need, right? You were talking about, engineering, right? So
right.
Had a hypothesis, had a theory that people needed it. And so I had Max Maxwell on my podcast in 2018. And he's like, hey, I'm throwing an event together. Coming up in March. Would you be interested in coming speak? It's like, yes, of course. Be willing to come speak. And so I spoke, and I was like, well, I'm going to put a presentation together on sales, and it's just going to be how we run our sales appointments right now. That's all it is, right? And this is going to be my tester. And hey, if they love it, we have something to sell. If they don't love it, well, that was just another bad idea I had. It's no big deal, right?
Okay.
And so I do the presentation, got massive, I got raving feedback. Had people posting on Instagram, hey, I used Steve Trang's line, and I got this contract. I got all this overwhelmingly positive feedback, and then people asking, hey, can you help us do it? To which, again, the answer is, of course, right? So we do our first event. We charge $1,000 a head, and I was nervous. I was so excited. I think we sold 22 people, right? 1,000 heads. Like, oh man, this is going to be so awesome. So, all right, so this is the seed. This is the proof of concept, just like when you close your first wholesale deal. I was like, all right, we got something here. Let's run with it.
Interesting. Okay. And how long ago was that? You said 2018, Max Maxwell?
2019 was wholesaling Elite Live.
I saw on your site recently that it looks like you, I don't know if it's recently, but it looks like you partnered with Ren Bartlett.
Yes, that's correct.
What was the purpose behind that, or the story behind that?
Yeah, so Ren is someone I've known since 2020, and when I first met him, he was a really intimidating guy.
Yeah.
But when I spoke with him, I could see like this guy knows how to lead salespeople. So salespeople are very special, right? We're really difficult to manage.
Right.
We're highly independent, and we don't think rules apply to us, right? So, and I say that identifying as the same profile, right? I'm very independent. Rules don't apply to me either.
Yep.
And so then how do you manage a bunch of people that don't believe the rules apply to them? And so I saw Ren ran an organization where they're doing 120 plus wholesale deals a month. And in order to do that, he had 50 salespeople, 6 sales managers, 1 sales director. I said, okay, well, like, I want to do this sales management training program. He's the guy, but I'm not going to talk to him. He has a business partner. Like, that would be like a gross violation. And so July of last year, he and his partner broke up shortly after my partner and I broke up, right? And when he broke up, I was like, hey, I've got this idea. I think you're the guy. Want to do this? He's like, yeah, let's do it. So that's how this all came about. It was just learning the tactics, the strategies and tactics on how to lead an effective and accountable sales force.
I see. Awesome. Okay. Wow. I guess that's our next purchase. That's okay. That's incredible. And that hasn't been going on for too long, right? Has it?
Less than a year. Less than a year.
It's going pretty well.
I think we picked a horrible time to launch it. Okay. Last year was not the time for people to be spending money. So, but we're seeing a major uptick. So we got a lot of people interested now. So, fortunately the market's turned around and things have changed.
Awesome.
But yeah,
awesome.
So yeah, I fully anticipate this could be, for me, I consider this to be the flagship product. And by the way, it's not limited to wholesale, right? Like we're marketing towards wholesale industries, but salespeople are crazy. It doesn't matter what vertical you're in.
They all need management. So you mentioned a few times that you're emotionless, or mostly emotionless. What are some things that you do have emotions for?
Sports.
Okay.
Right. I mean, you can't hide the feelings in sports. Beyond that, there really isn't a lot of emotions. So I actually have, give me a second here.
For anyone who's on audio, he just grabbed a thing that looks like a ginormous crayon.
Yeah. So we had Larry Yatch. He is a former Navy SEAL. He came in and coached our team last year. And he's just coaching our team. We're talking about how he also has a lack of feelings. And so he's learning his emotions.
Okay.
Right? And so my team's like, Steve, you only have one emotion, and it's anger. right?
Oh,
So
jeez.
so they made me a red anger crayon.
Is that what it says on it on the side right there? Anger.
This is anger.
That's
yeah,
awesome.
and look, I've never been angry in the office, so it's really, I was kind of sharing the story that I had with my, talking to the SEAL, talking to my kids, and like, Dad, you do have two feelings, two emotions. Like, okay, what are they? They're like anger and disappointment. It's like, oh, okay.
That's funny.
Now, we got to meet your lovely, gorgeous daughters.
Yeah.
Is that all your kids?
Yeah, all three girls were at the event last Sunday.
Dude, for someone who's not an emotional person to have three girls, that's impressive. How do you pull that off at home? Your wife's got to like bear the weight of all the emotion in the house.
Well, I mean, the first isn't very emotional. The second is very empathetic, and the third is very emotional. So that's the one I worry about. But the first one is just a little version of me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm not as worried about her. Although she's turning 13 this year, so who knows?
I'm curious that, you mentioned a few books, and it's one of the questions that you ask your guests on your show, but I'd love to ask you, what's a book that you've referred to other people's more than any other?
Recently it's been Rigging the Game. It's about playing the game, stacking a deck in your favor.
Okay.
One thing that happens a lot, particularly right now in this age of social media, is we see what other people have and we want the same thing too. And there's no judgment if that's what you want. The question is, you got to ask first, is that what you really want? Right? Because that's what you really want, then go for it. Right? Like if you really want a Lamborghini, go get a Lamborghini. Right? But most of us, do we really want a Lamborghini? Or do we want the results that allow you to afford a Lamborghini? Right? Okay.
And is that what that book goes over?
The book goes over understanding yourself.
I see.
Understanding how you make decisions, understanding your biases, how you sabotage yourself on a regular basis. So for me, I'm a quick start, right? Like, hey, do you want to do this? Yes. You want to speak on stage in front of 1,000 people? Yes. I've never done that before, but yes, right? You want to launch a sales training program? Yes. Do you want to do this? Yes. So my bias is to take action quickly. And it's cool when it works.
Right.
But you waste a lot of time and resources when you don't. Right. And so that's where we got to be careful. Like, hey, before we dedicate resources to this, what kind of information could we gather to make sure this is actually an intelligent move? Another one of my favorite books is The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham. And the question he asks in that book is like, if you can go back in time and erase the 3 dumbest financial decisions you made, where would you be? And I could say without a doubt, I'd be retired by now.
Really?
Right? Oh, yeah. Right. But I can't. But now it kind of goes back to like just thinking through before you make your decisions.
Well, I'm definitely a quick start. So that's me. I'm the yes man.
Yeah. Let's go. Where are we going? Let's go.
I know.
Hop in. Come on.
Yeah.
Nowhere to go. All right, we're in the car. Where are we going? I don't know.
Yeah.
So that book, I mean, if you don't mind, like what's one of the things that if you were to erase it, you'd be a millionaire? What's one of those mistakes? And then like, what did you learn from reading that book and applying that to that mistake?
So the biggest mistake, if I can undo, right? It's not really regret, but if I can undo this decision, was when I first got into the business in 2007, I went to a RIA, right? ASRIA, it's the biggest RIA in the country. So Arizona RIA. So I'm walking around at this event and they got like, I think it's like the Active Funding Group. I think it's the name of the company, right? And like hard money lender, 18%. And I'm there with my mentor. I was like, 18%, that's stupid. It's like a credit card, right? Like why would anyone ever pay 18% on a loan? And he's like, well, they use it to buy houses. It's like, well, that's even worse. Like how much, what are those payments like? Right. But if I had to do it all over again, I would have bought a lot of houses for $30,000 to $50,000 with 18% hard money. Because on day one, you cash flow. You cash flow on day one, right? Like a $50,000 property, your payments are what, $750? Like you can swing that, right? In 2007. So if I would have just bought all those houses at 18%, I'd be doing pretty good, particularly since all those houses for 50,000 are like 400 something thousand today. I'd be sitting pretty.
I see. I see. What I mean, man, you've had a crazy journey, and I do like to talk a little bit of failures before we swing over to successes. But what's one of the most memorable failures that you have from your real estate career?
Memorable failures. I mean, there's a lot of failures. I would say probably the biggest consistent failures. It actually kind of goes back to rigging the game. Is making decisions based off few data points. And what I mean by that is, all right, we had 2 good months in a row, or we had a record month followed by another good month, right? So what do we do? Now we're MC Hammer, right? Now we're raising our expenses. We're hiring these people. We're buying those things that we were wanting to buy. This data source, this lead source we were wanting to get, we get that lead source. We hire these people, and we raise their expenses quickly, right? Because, hey, we're this awesome real estate investor now.
Right.
But then the revenue goes back to where it was. Your expenses don't. And so I would say I've made that stupid boneheaded decision way too many times. And every time I've done it, it's been okay. But last year, it really sucked, right? Last year, when the market took a big dump, was not the time for one of those boneheaded mistakes. So I would say the failures I make, which I learn now, is not to raise your expenses to match up what you believe is your new reality. Let's give that business 3 to 6 months to really figure out if that's your new reality.
If that's consistent.
Or did you hit a good streak? So that I would say that's a consistent mistake. But last year or a year and a half ago, I hired all these people, built out this entire media team, spent $50K remodeling this building here, doubling the size of our office, right? So to add, I don't know, to spend $50K on a remodeling job on a building that's not yours, and then adding, I don't know, $30,000, $40,000 a month in overhead, probably wasn't the right decision.
Hindsight, man. Well, I mean, I guess kind of on that note, knowing what you know now, you got a ton of experience and a lot of life lessons. The classic, if you could tell yourself, when you're a kid, but not even that. I want to go back to when you started real estate. If you could give yourself some advice when you started real estate, knowing what you know now, what would some of those tips be?
Don't be a realtor. So that was the other one. All right. So I was a realtor full time for 9 years. So
like that was a lot of wasted time. Sorry.
Yeah, I consider that the last decade. So I went reading Rich Dad Poor Dad to get into real estate, to buying rental properties, to become a realtor. Like, why? That has nothing to do with Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Right.
And so I would say, again, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about rigging the game, is always being focused on the task at hand, being focused on the why. Why'd you get into the business? More time freedom, money freedom, relationship freedom, freedom to do whatever you want, whenever you want, with whoever you want, right? Like that's why generally most of us get into business.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Being a realtor doesn't do any of those things. Right?
So true.
So I would say, going back, I'd be really, really clear on what you want. And another question, I was talking to my wife the other day, and she was saying, what do you think is different between you now and you a couple of years ago? Like, what's to stop you from making another, crazy, monumental mistake, right? I was like, well, I'm asking myself different questions now. And she's like, what questions were you asking before? What questions are you asking now? I was like, well, back then the question was always, how can I make more revenue? How can I grow revenue? What can I do to drive revenue, right? That was the question I always asked.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm in my 40s. The questions I'm asking are, how can I grow profit with less risk? How can I grow profit without adding risk? It's a different question.
Yeah. How are you coming about the answer to that?
It's slowing down, and that's why I was talking about rigging the game, right? Slowing down, like, hey, get some data points. Make sure this is actually what you want to do. And when I'm talking about data points, I'm not talking about analysis paralysis. That's not what I'm talking about at all, right? It's just establishing the rules before you do something. Like, hey, what information do I have that leads me to believe that this is going to be a good idea? what time frame am I willing to establish where if this doesn't accomplish this goal by a certain time, we're going to just, table it. What are the resources we're willing to dedicate to it? And what resources are we unwilling to dedicate to it? Because one thing I did a lot in growing, having multiple businesses is, okay, well, we'll rob Peter to pay Paul temporarily, right? But what happens? We're starving the profitable business of resources,
right?
Whether it's time, attention, money, or people. And so we're starving this other company to get this other company off the ground. Whereas now it's like, okay, well, before we do this other thing, we got to be very clear. We can't use the resources from these other companies.
I see.
Right? So we're establishing the rules before we even start this other.
I see. That makes total sense. I feel like, from my previous business ventures, I've had partners and they never worked and, worked out. And, some I'm sure was my fault, some was their fault and whatnot. But yeah, going into this new partnership with Tanner, I want to say I knew kind of what I wanted, through all those past mistakes. And so, we kind of rigged the game in our behalf. So that makes total sense to me.
And a lot of what I said probably sounds like common sense, but we are not commonsensical when we're in the thick of it.
That's so true. Yeah, making those decisions. What are some of the freedoms? I guess let's go happy talk. Because I love hearing lifestyle. I love hearing, and I think it's inspiring, especially for newer folks or folks that are just getting some momentum, as Tanner and I are in our real estate business. It's cool to go to Arizona and see Jamil's lifestyle. It's cool to hear about some of the stuff you guys are doing and these crazy trips and just your relationships. So what are some of the freedoms that real estate's afforded you?
I mean, I guess the biggest thing is I get to do what I want as far as spending time with my kids. So I am not this lavish lifestyle, whatever, right? I'm not that guy. I don't care for traveling, right? I feel like every day I come to work is a blessing. I get to do what I love to do every single day. So for me, the biggest thing is I get to spend quality time with my kids. I drop them off 5 days a week in the mornings. And then we have dinner every night. And on Saturdays, I take them to kung fu lessons, swim lessons, this and that. So for me, I would say the luxury, it's boring. This is not exciting, but I get to teach my kid valuable life lessons. I think that's the luxury I got.
That's incredible. I see, man, dude. I want to transition a little bit to kind of back to the sales training because what is it that, if you're a wholesaler, if you're brand new, let's say like we're a part of the Astro community, Astro flipping, why should we get sales training, right? All we got to do is just keep calling these agents and kind of follow the scripts and whatnot. Like, why do we need sales training?
It's a fantastic question. And really it just comes down to, what kind of return do you want on your effort? When we're talking about sales, we're talking about how you can grow revenue, how you can maximize your opportunities and leads without spending any more money, right? So it's just about maximizing the conversation, connecting with another human being. Like, why should that realtor return your call versus all the other calls, right? So why should this buyer buy from you versus everyone else that's sending them deals, right? So like, the ability to have quality conversations and uncovering what is important to the other person is going to help you determine the level of success. So, we talked about poker a moment ago. The best analogy I can have is if we could play poker and your cards are face up, I should win every time.
Yeah.
Right.
And so sales is the ability to have a conversation with the other person where they're opening up completely and you know how to navigate this conversation, right? Once I can see your cards, I know how to navigate this conversation.
Have you found? Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Have you found there to be a character trait in your salespeople that you can identify a good salesperson pretty quickly versus someone that you're like, this person's going to need a little more work? Is there a specific character trait or maybe something in them that you've noticed is more successful over others?
So it's two words. The things I'm looking for, and I value this more than anything else, and it's humble confidence, right? Are you coachable and are you confident, right? I want you to be confident, right? Because no one's working with, a meek person, right? A soft-spoken, quiet, folding like a chair person, right? Like that's not going to work, right? So we need to be confident, but you also need humility to know that you can grow. And so that humble confidence, if I see humble confidence in another person, like I feel like I found a unicorn. Like we've hit the jackpot. This person's going to make so much money with us.
How does a person display humble confidence?
They got to be coachable. They got to be aware, right? Like you ever see like a friend that something like that was totally inappropriate for this moment.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
Right? Like, it's just lack of emotional intelligence awareness, right? I mean, like I kind of saw this when I was Astro, right? Like the guy took a call in the middle of someone else's presentation, right? Like that's not awareness.
Right.
And so, it's how you show up, how you present yourself, how you, there's the outfit, there's the eye contact, the way they shake their hands, the ability to say thank you, right? It's just all these things. I think if you could just sum it all together, it's humble confidence.
I see. I see. I love that. I've never thought of putting an adjective on the confidence. I thought confidence was good enough, but you're right. Humble confidence that would make a perfect the unicorn in the world that we live in. Wow. All right.
Yeah, because people either like overconfident or they're not confident enough, right? We got to find the guy that's confident but also coachable.
Right. I get it. So the coachability is kind of the aspect of the humility, right? Because they know that they are still able to learn. It's not like they're just hot shit and they've got it all figured out. So that's where that humbleness comes in. It's in being coachable. I see. Okay. Well, on that note, let's talk about sales disruptors training, because I'm pretty sure that can help with, at least it can help with confidence in learning sales. And then hopefully, the humility, I don't know. Is humility something that you can learn or develop?
Either you develop it or it's going to be acquired.
Right? Yeah, that's true.
I wasn't always humble, right? I wasn't always humble, right? It took a lot of failure to get humility. So, being hot stuff at ASU and get your butt handed to you in grad school, right? Thinking you're going to crush the realtor world and then realizing, oh, it's not just intelligence.
Right.
So, like I said, 2022, right? Making all this money and then not. So there's either you're going to have it or God will help you get it.
That's so
one
true.
of those two things will happen.
Oh, that's a really good point. When it comes to sales training, like I said, we just recently purchased the Sales Disruptor course for our team, for our company, and for ourselves. So we're excited, but we don't have that much context yet to dig in other than what we talked about. I would love for you, if you can kind of, I hate to say, give the pitch, but I'd love for you to give kind of the elevator pitch to the audience as to why should they even look into, sales training through your organization?
Yeah. I think we touched on a moment ago, right? Like, do you want more return on your effort or are you satisfied with the return on your effort? I think that's the first thing, right? Because who doesn't want more revenue without increased expenses?
Right.
And that kind of goes back to the humble confidence, right? Like if you think you already got it, well then, you already capped out your potential. And then I think the other thing too is, why me? Well, we talked about how bad I was at sales, right? And so it was because how bad I was at sales that I spent so much time learning it, to the level that I've learned it at, right? And like I said, 5 hours a week for the first couple years with my sales trainer, and then being out teaching it to the best in class has allowed me, right, to learn all the different tools, tactics, strategies, but not just learning that, but also qualifies me to do the delivery, because I've also learned how to deliver it better. Right.
Right.
One of the things we see a lot is a lot of business owners naturally are good at selling, right? They wouldn't be at that level if they didn't have to hustle and sell to get on their way there.
Right.
So a lot of guys can do it on their own, and their frustration generally occurs because their people just don't get it.
I see.
Right. And it's like, just watch me do it. Just do what I do. It's like, no, like that's not how that works. Right. Can you imagine Michael Jordan coaching you? Just do what I do. It won't.
I'm trying.
Right. Like, believe me, Jordan, I've tried. Right. Yeah. And so what you got to do is you got to find someone who is miserable at it and learned every bit about sales in order to do it at a high level. So I would say, you know, the combination between, you know, what I've done as far as learning it and where I've come from. But if that's not enough, you know, watch old footage of me from Closers Olympics. It's on my YouTube channel. And watching me just get beat up by all these other homeowners, and watch how I overcame all of those, right? Like what was really cool when we did Closers Olympics in 2020 was I got two feedbacks in two pieces of feedback inside the comments, which I thought, you know, both of them were really cool. First one, they said I was the king of awkward silence, which I had no idea, by the way, up until that moment.
Nice.
So that was cool. The other one, they said Steve was the absolute best at overcoming objections, which was also cool. But the truth of the matter is I didn't hear a single objection. And I'm not saying this to brag or say, oh, I eat objections for breakfast. It's none of that. When you're really good at sales, when you hear an objection, it's just a statement to be investigated further. So, for example, when you say the house isn't for sale, my assumption is, oh, you sold the property. Great. And it's like, no, the property hasn't sold yet. Oh, okay. But you were able to resolve that other challenge when you reached out to us. No, the problem hasn't been resolved yet. I don't get it. And then they start talking about what's going on. And now we walked right past the objection. But I don't feel like I overcame an objection. I was just curious, right? You know, operating with childlike curiosity, figuring out why the house isn't for sale anymore. Set it in my way using our sales techniques to get there, but investigating what they're telling us. And if we can investigate what they're telling us, we can get to the truth of the matter, which goes back to us talking about playing poker with the cards face up, right? Now that we've gotten to this point, I've already seen 2 or 3 of your cards. I'm in a pretty good spot, right, to continue navigating this conversation. So I think, you know, going back, if you watch Closers Olympics, you'll see us exercising the techniques that we teach.
I love the poker analogy. That's so good. So what does your ideal student look like? You know what I mean? Not look like, but you know what I mean? Like what are their character traits outside of humble confidence? Like if I'm going to buy your course and get the most out of it, what actions do I take? You know what I mean?
Like what kind of actions do you mean?
Yeah, that's probably a shitty way to phrase this question. So essentially, you know, like for Jamil, you know, like if I were to ask Jamil, hey, you know, who's your ideal Astro student? He would say, hey, man, it's someone who comes into the community, they pour in, you know, they're selfless, they're, you know, so who's like your ideal sales training candidate?
So I would say the ideal sales training candidate is someone that, I mean, this is just too broad, but this is someone that wants to get better at sales. Okay. Right. And this is it's probably too broad. Maybe we could do a better job buttoning it down. But you know, for me, from my experience, sales is happening anywhere and everywhere, and it's only if you're unwilling to acknowledge that fact if you're unwilling to acknowledge that fact, you're just hurting yourself, right? Sure. Because like we're selling our kids. We're selling our spouses. We're selling our team members. We're selling our parents to watch our kids, whatever, right? Like we're selling all the time, asking for a late checkout, asking to sit in the emergency row, right? Like all these things is sales. And so if you're not willing to get better at communication, then I don't know what else I can do to help. I'll give you another example, right? So you saw my daughter, you met her at the event. So she's 12 and she's going from her school right now, which has a gifted program, and she's going to a more challenging school, right? And the idea is that she'll do better in high school and college, whatever. I don't even care. It's just important to my wife, right? And so, so my wife like, hey, you should go to the school. And my daughter's like, I don't want to go to the school because I know it's gonna be more work. It's more homework. I'm gonna be leaving some of my friends and all these sound logical reasons why you shouldn't switch schools, right? So my wife really wants this. My daughter's like, hell no, this doesn't make sense. I don't want to do it, right? She's adamant. But I also know that she's a lot like me, right? Super competitive, very independent. So after this conversation's done, right, we're at dinner, I just said to her, hey, Amelia, that's okay. You don't want to go. I thought that school was probably going to be too hard for you anyway. And she's like, I'm going to that school, right?
That's awesome.
Right? So we're selling all the
Right.
time. It's whether you want to acknowledge it or not. And so if you don't want to get better at communicating, well, then just stay where the level you're at.
Right. But how much time should a person expect to kind of, pour into themselves for this course in the beginning? An hour a day, more or less, or?
I would never do more than an hour. I think, you sign up, you get access to all your modules immediately. I think there's probably 8 to 10 hours in there, but I would never do more than an hour at a time, because when you're in this business, you need to set aside time to prospect, to reach out, to make connections and this and that, right?
Right.
Learning is great. I love learning, but I've also seen people spend too much time learning and not enough time doing. So I would not do more than an hour, but I would spend at least 15 minutes every day. Whether you're completing a module, jumping in the community, talking to other, I like to call them sales assassins from across the country.
Awesome.
You should engage, right? Because the best way to learn, it's what I love about communities. The best way to learn is to go through it together.
Right.
Like I said, my sales trainer helped me put it together, but also I was in a room with a bunch of other homevestor guys who are all going through the same struggle. So we're talking to each other as well. So we're learning from the front, but we're also learning from our peers. And so that really helped me it all clicked together. So, I would say jump in, learn from the modules, learn from Ian, who's doing the teaching as well, and then learn from the community.
Awesome. I know quite a few of our friends, in our circles that do have a team. They could really, use sales training. Matter of fact, we were talking about that over the weekend, just the different ways to train your team. Is there a version of the sales disruptors that is fitting for a team, or does everyone, should everyone just kind of get their own, or how does that work?
I would recommend everyone get their own.
Okay.
So here's what I've learned in leading organizations. We can buy it for them, right? And they can learn that way. And it works. Not saying it doesn't work. Or they can invest in it. And then they really learn it, right? When it's their money on the line.
They got skin in the game.
Yeah. They got skin in the game, And I remember, I was the one that was always investing in myself. And actually, as a matter of fact, the reason why I left is because my guy wasn't investing in me. I was just investing in myself. It's like, why am I here with you? Right? So you've got to invest resources into your team. But I think A players invest in themselves. And for $97 a month, I guarantee anybody that goes through our program should make an extra $15,000, $30,000, $50,000 a year, if not more, right? It's just insane how much sales is in your life.
Right.
You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm sure you've got tons of examples, but we want to be one for you as well. I mean, I love that we had you on the podcast before we got into the sales training, because we're doing it for sure. That's just the way we are with our company. And so I can't wait to have a massive improvement, have an incredible story, and hopefully maybe have you back on to share, the good things that have happened to us since we've incorporated everything that we've learned from your sales training. So
I look forward to it.
Absolutely. Well, Steve, I thank you so much for coming on the show today. I mean, it's been an honor, man. I do have one final question, and it's I take these things from you, I really do. But this one, I really am curious to know. So I want to ask you, what's your superpower?
So my superpower I'm gonna pick two, if that's okay.
Please.
I think learning and teaching, right? So, I'm able to pick up complex topics and explain it in a manner that is understandable to almost anybody.
That's huge. That's huge. That is definitely a superpower.
Yeah.
Is there any way you can rub some of that off on me?
It's superpower. I'm sorry. But we had a world-class professor when I was at Arizona State who people traveled around the world to learn from this guy, right? Because he's explaining quantum physics. It's not a simple topic, right? Quantum physics.
For sure.
And he could explain it in a way that just made sense, right? So that was definitely one of his superpowers. And so, but like people travel the world for it. And, I am incredibly blessed. People pay me from across the country. They travel across the country, come to my office to learn it, right? So I would definitely say that's one of my superpowers.
That's awesome, man. Was the professor Michio Kao? What's his name? Michio Kaku or something like that? Was it him?
It was Dieter Schroeder. It was okay. And it was just, he was just such an unassuming guy, simple guy, right? But like apparently I actually looked him up the other day, and only sad to find out he passed away in 2012. But like he had all these patents, and he was just, again, if you could explain quantum physics so that like a high school student could understand it, like you understand this topic at a high level.
Yeah. That's incredible. Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm sure his funeral was very well attended if he had that big of an impact on you. So that's incredible. Well, Steve, I would love it. Could you share with the family with how they can, where they can learn more about Sales Disruptors?
I think the best place is, I assume you're going to post this somewhere with a link.
Absolutely. We will definitely have a link.
Yeah. So I would say definitely that's probably the best place to go. And then in the meantime, we have Real Estate Disruptors. It's on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify. And if anybody ever wants to reach out to me, I am on Instagram at steve.trang. I try to respond when I can, but odds are 90% of the time it's my team responding. But I do try to respond.
Nice. Well, I'm glad you responded because that's how we got you on the podcast initially. Well, thank you for that, man. And for those of you who haven't, for whatever reason, you've been living under a rock and you haven't heard of Real Estate Disruptors, an incredible podcast. It's one that's unique to me, at least, in that it's one podcast, but different formats. You've got Pardon the Disruption, where it's a group of 4 just juggernauts, just titans in the real estate game, just talking shit and really dropping really good gems at the same time. Like, it's a lot of fun. And you got Certainty. Was it Certainty Matters, right?
Certainty Talks.
Certainty Talks, yeah, with Paul. I can't remember his name. Anyways, there's a podcast for every single archetype of person, all in Real Estate Disruptors. So please, please, please check this one out as soon as you're done listening to this episode. So Steve, thank you so much. And it's been an honor and pleasure to have you on. I'm so grateful for your time. And man, we're all better for it. So sincerely, thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Tanner. It was good seeing you guys again. It was only a few short days ago. So I appreciate meeting you guys face to face at your most mastermind, and here again.
Likewise. Look forward to part 2 when we're crushing it in sales. Hopefully we can get you back on then.
Once you guys start crushing it in sales, come to my show.
Oh, that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. That'd be a big full circle moment. Well, guys, look, that's a wrap. Look, we want to interview you. Like we want to sit down and tell your story. So go out there, crush it, make it happen. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Wholesale Elite Podcast. Until then, peace. What up, Elite fan? That's a wrap for today's episode. But look, if you got value out of the show today, do us a huge favor and give us a review or give us a like or subscribe. Do all the things to help us get the word out there. And look, we want to see you on the next show. So get out there and crush it, make it happen. Stay tuned for the next episode. Peace.